in the meeting, we've discussed the filter category sidebar in the context of Project Browser. You've mentioned that at the University of Edinburgh, you've had a user test, and the outcome was basically that the preferable choice would be having the filter sidebar on the right instead of the left.
Oh, I mean, it
But
wasn't specific to Project Browser. That was like, so we did user testing around like a searching filtering
yeah,
experience, and the the results of well, there was design and testing, but the the testing didn't show an issue with like the filters all being on the right.
yeah, but no, but my question was with the filters on the right, in those tests, what the main menu was. Was it a horizontal one or a vertical one?
It would have been. I mean, I'm trying to think what. I don't think we. I don't know if we presented a menu above that because this was on an experience which is not like it's like a searching experience that doesn't have a lot of other a lot of other like things on the site. It's kind of like a dedicated experience, so it wasn't there wasn't really I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I don't think there was like another navigation on the page. Um, there might have been like a there might have been a barrel on top, but that's I think just because that's like, there was like our site header and things like that.
Okay. Because the thought was, as the screenshot I've sent you, with the vertical navigation on the left now in Claro or in Core in general, either way, having a filter bar on the left as well as on the left, it's stacked basically, and on if you have it on the right, you have the results crammed within both sidebars, and either way, it looks and feels sort of yeah, overwhelming and an information overload still.
Yeah, I wouldn't like. Yeah, I don't know. Like, um, it's probably not like 100% comparable, but yeah, there's just I think that's just a symptom of the fact there's like a lot of information on one page there. There's like a lot to parse.
Yep.
I think it's not specifically the categories as such. I think it's just the fact there's a lot of information there.
Yep. And just one last word in regards of that. At the moment, that issue is going with moving the sidebar into that multi-select field. And that way it's a bit more cleaned up and less cluttered and less overwhelming. So that was the outcome so far. But at the moment, the patch isn't applying, so I can't show.
Okay, like you mean moving the filters to the barrel on the top, moving the categories?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think the problem is like, it's like how do you like having the categories separated from the other filters feels like doesn't feel right.
Yeah, and that way it would. 1 second. Can just search the screenshot.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Ah, now it's working.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Hmm. someone want to share their screen?
One second, I can. And oops. Sharing now.
Yep. So I see on your screen the issue for the usability meeting. So that's 3456247. And I guess we're talking about the project browser again and the where to put the categories and the other search filters.
Yeah. Aaron brought up my questions I've sent him a while ago, and we were just going through those. And the last thing I've just sent in the chat was the link to comment number 20 for issue 3318817. And that is the current state. And I've just said that it's at the moment the merge request isn't applying, and therefore I'm unable to show within the browser.
So what is the current question?
My question I've asked was because Aaron raised the suggestion of going with instead of having the filter on the left-hand side, moving it to the right-hand side based on and also moving the other filters within that and have everything there. And out of curiosity, I've asked him in those user tests where they've used the filter section on the right-hand side in the sidebar, what kind of menu they had. Was it basically an horizontal one or a vertical one? Because with the navigation module, either way, as you can see here, you have the, I can quickly, a new tab. And in a new tab, it's just mockups, but that way it's basically stacked. First you have the sidebar with the navigation, and then you have the filter sidebar in the current state without any patch applied, and the intertwined filter section with the maintained covered security policy and so forth. And on the other hand, moving the filter to the sidebar on the right. That way, basically the results are crammed within those both the sidebars and on smaller screens. It's still hard to navigate. And if you scroll down in that current suggestion, all filters would be in that filter section above. So you have basically first the search, then the filters. It's not the correct one. 1 second. I wasn't the wrong one. That is the correct one, sorry. So you have basically first the search, then the filter, and then the results. And that way, it's sort of a clear separation of concerns, as well as the order and the thinking.
And this would probably be more similar to what you'd see on a narrow screen on a mobile device, for example.
What is his username? Cetagraph also added more steps. That way you get a 2-column and then a single column stacked onto each other. Oh, 1 second. Oh. Ah, perfect. Theme just rebased. Yeah, that way we can easier discuss the current patch. So that is the way it looks, and if you narrow it down.
Oh, well, that's a problem. Maybe that's a navigation module problem.
Yeah. And it's not done yet, but first, yeah, the styling has to be done here as well as the behavior. And one suggestion I've raised is the following. Within the meeting, there was raised the concern, which is definitely valid. Having a select field with only 2 options is not worthy for a select field, and either go with a checkbox or some other interface component. But my suggestion was now, instead of going with a select field, to use some sort of toggle button. That way you could keep the visual consistency there. You could also use different labels, but at the same time, something like it is shown, yeah, on that example here. They go also with multi-select fields, but at the same time, they have also a toggle button.
So we talked about this 1 or 2 weeks ago, maybe both 1 week and 2 weeks ago. If I remember correctly, we're going over things we've already talked about. So the first decision is whether to have the categories on the left or on the right or on top. And I think we agreed that the left and the right were taking up too much space, that the list of categories just isn't important enough to take up that much space on the screen.
Yep.
So putting it up top as it is now is a good first step. But then the next step is that it's confusing to use the same widget, to use select lists for all 4 of these categories, which is a list of checkboxes, and then all the others, which are only 2 options. So I think we already agreed that the other 3 should be some sort of a toggle or a checkbox.
Yep.
Rather than a select list.
Yep, I just wanted to point out that at the moment it's just a select list here for those 3, but that is gonna change.
Okay.
But we haven't raised the point of having something like that, like a toggle button, like used here on that semantic Scholar example.
Yeah,
And that I thought, oops, go first, sorry.
Scott pointed out that a toggle is really just some visual prettification of what's underlying a checkbox. You know, a toggle is just a fancy checkbox, I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yep.
Scott, did you want to say it differently?
Just as a radio group, right? It's the same thing that with JavaScript, right? Like if you're replacing element with a toggle, it's JavaScript on top of the fact that it's either a checkbox or a radio group still.
Right.
Does core actually have a toggle element or a switch? I don't think that's an element Drupal has already, right? We have a drop button, but we don't actually have, like, core doesn't have a switch out of the box, does it?
In the context of Project Browser, as you can see here, is that list and grid, which is all basically a switch, and Chin has a component for that now. And I've suggested Sasha Egi if he could move that also over to Claro and core in general.
Mhm.
That would be basically useful.
Yeah, it hasn't elevated that way yet. Okay.
And I've heard there's some like toggles, you know, they originally, best I know, they originally came from iOS and mobile, and then they sort of made their way into desktop views, but actually they can be quite problematic if they're not done right, because you know, like I think a checkbox is like more, it's like a slightly better pattern overall to use, but yeah, there's a lot of, that would be an interesting one because there's a lot of potential pitfalls with these toggles that seem to appear everywhere.
Yeah, I think the main problem with toggles is that it's often not clear whether it's showing the current state or the state that will apply when you click on it.
Yeah, it's also like it relies on the implementations that we're all familiar with, because we read left to right, rely on the fact that the right state is on, the left state is off. Like I bet if you ask somebody from a country where, you know, with a culture where they read right to left, they'd probably be thinking the opposite. So and that's fine because you can, I suppose you can make them adapt, but then that just results in like a somewhat less consistent experience in Drupal. Like any screenshots that have toggles, you know, in documentation would maybe not necessarily be universally applicable. So yeah, there's a lot of potential considerations around whether that's a good idea.
But on the other hand, if you go with, for example, a checkbox here, then it's also the microcopy problematic, sort of, to communicate what happens or what applies if the checkbox is unchecked and what applies if the checkbox is checked.
I just dropped a link in the chat. It is actually how I handled this in one of my modules. And it's using a button and area and a lot of SVG to communicate the state, which is a sample I found on that. The inspiration link there has a series of examples for this sort of thing.
Is that a short enough URL that we can read it for the sake of the recording?
Katie, oh no, not easily. Sorry, no.
Kitty
It won't go off
Rodel.
limits.
But the issue Scott just linked to is 3398863.
On a contrib module.
Right, the auctions contrib module.
Yeah, so this was the best sort of example of toggling that I could find and decided to implement around that.
But that is another point. That kind of toggle.
The example is also, so this example that I used is a button element, but the examples also do include just standard check boxes and list elements, and how to how to elevate. Of course, it's a lot of elevation with JavaScript and CSS, and beyond the fact that it's just basically a checkbox. Or the other examples. You can toggle it with anything. But the UI, that way the UI you produced to show that the user visually, it says on off, but it's still a button, and it has the area state for actually be clicked, active. The inputs have the advantage of having CSS degrade, whereas the button, of course, requires JavaScript.
I've just been thinking about checkboxes or radio buttons, but then if you do have standard form elements, then there's the question of whether they will be activated by JavaScript or whether you have to submit the form. Buttons are the normal the normal interface items for something with an immediate action. So what are you trying to show us, Ralph?
I just wanted to let's switch between list and grid, but it isn't working on that small screen right now. I have to detach it again. Yeah, then there are again. But as you can see, those list and grid are actual buttons. And yeah, so slightly different toggle there than the other ones. But my thought was basically in regards of a toggle button, if going with a pattern used on the semantic scholar page, there you have just a button. And with the example here, you have the toggle with left and right and the label next to it. And if you take a look.
So that's just visual. The whole thing is just a button, and inside the button is an SVG that the graphic changes when the state is active or not. So you've misunderstood what you were looking at. It's a button with two SVGs on either side.
Yeah, that's clear now, but I mean, my thought was for that interface here to have for one some sort of consistency for similar buttons. One is actual multi-select list, and the others, if they would go with the pattern from here. Oops, not working. Okay, with the pattern here, then you would see when it's pushed, pressed or not pressed, and the button label would update it. For sighted users, you could have changing button labels, while for screen reader users, you could use an ARIA label with a fixed label, and that says, for example, development status active selected, or maintenance status maintained maintenance status selected, something like that.
I vote for radio buttons. Development status active, all. 2 radio buttons. There's no trouble coming up with a microcopy as there would be for a checkbox. The active status is unambiguous, which is always the problem is with toggles, as I said before. And there are actually more than 2 development statuses, and in the future, if we change our minds about simplifying the form, it would be super easy to add a 3rd or 4th radio button to the list.
I think it was originally radio buttons, and then it's become drop downs, but I think the problem with radio buttons is that then you've got like, I mean, not the problem necessarily, but the nice thing about these all being drop downs is that it's very visually a consistent look. Because then if we say we have like development status as radio buttons, then you have also yeah, exactly that. But then like, okay, then do we make categories radio buttons, which or checkboxes to be consistent, and then which is basically what they are, but then they're in the sidebar because well, there'll be far too many to do it up above. So now we're back to the case where we have the categories there in the sidebar and then like the other filters above, which yeah, I think I don't know. I think there's some nice like consistency if they're all all drop downs, I guess. But
Yeah, you're certainly right. Here I have a Drupal 11 site with Umami and the latest released version of the project browser installed. And I guess this is beta 6. And I'm looking at the radio buttons. So that is what we have in beta 6. Yeah. And I think that's the right user interface for these 2 choices. I think it's confusing to turn it into a select list. And I think it's okay to have a select list with a bunch of checkboxes, a multi-select list, right next to those 3 pairs of radio buttons.
Sure.
yeah, I don't really have a strong feeling. I think you're probably right in terms of the like the appropriate elements to use. I think it's probably one of those things you have to see what it looks like when it's there. Hey Ralph, could you go back to the other screen that had the drop downs? I'm just curious, like how it works with categories where like you can select more than one.
That is not yet done properly. Yeah, you could.
Oh,
You
so
have to.
is this some kind of custom like drop down thing going on here?
sort
Data
of.
list. It's probably a data list,
Hmm.
I might assume.
What do you mean by
That's
that?
something that is that one of those like new HTML5 things that have
Yeah, it's a progression around select, right? The need for something to have a title and a drop list of things. So the drop list of things could be a, so this isn't a data list, but I don't think, yeah, no, they would literally, data list is actually an element, right?
interesting.
It's used with search. Like most of the examples that are starting off are for search. So it can be the search suggestions and you'd use a data list.
Can you select more than one thing with a data list?
The data list can be whatever you want it to be, right? They're just items like down level. So it just has down level data that each one is just a data element, like a list. So whatever you put in the list could have a checkbox, yes.
Interesting.
Or it could be, they're meant to be, I think they're meant to be like, in terms of search, it's meant to be like the list element and the thing that somebody could select and that would become the search value. That's the intent behind it around that example.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Well,
Yeah, but that's done more like a drop button right now. This is a super fancy drop button kind of thing.
yeah.
I think it's important to remember that the goal is to reduce the clutter that the filters on the side was creating. Right, it was really the filters that was the worst part of the clutter, even without navigation, even before navigation was part of the question. And that's kind of the most positive aspect to keep the focus on. The other items have to go back to radios, that's fine, should be fine. We shouldn't be afraid of introducing people to complex interfaces and more information, because if they're going to do this, they'll have to get used to that, of course. Just make sure the tool actually allows people to understand the information, not be afraid of the information. Learning what Drupal modules are is a lot of work, and that's just part of the job once you get to the page. That's my happy thought for now.
Yeah, and someone said a couple of minutes ago that it helps to have these things implemented so we can actually see them, and I agree with that. And looking at this now with the 4 select lists, I don't like it. I just think it is misleading to have 3 select lists with 2 options, 2 radio button options, and the 4th select list with a dozen checkboxes.
Yeah, but that is just an intermediate step that will change in any way. Just the question in which way. But yeah, in the current situation, that way is definitely agree. I agree. But I'm unsure. I would have to see it.
So I've stated my preference loudly and often. Ralph, what's your preference?
My preference is more of, because there's one other problem. At the moment, as you can see here, for those 3, you have the option show all and active, while over here you have just the filter categories. So I wonder, because technically all the 4 behave the same. You have basically the filters in that case by category, where you, without anything selected, and you post a search query, you get the entire set of results. And as soon as you pick one filter, you pick a lens by which that set of results is observed. And with the radio buttons, you would still have the show all, and therefore, aside the fact that from a visual standpoint, I'm more drawn to that toggle button example from the semantic Scholar, which looks like a button that is actually pressed, and the way where is it? Yeah, there. And the label within those buttons, or the multi-select, is updated, reflecting the selection. That is the thing I'm leaning towards.
So you're leaning towards toggle buttons for the other three.
Yeah, but not it's a visual thing, not that kind of toggle buttons with that visual toggle left or right and a label next to it. Instead, an actual button looking like that without that caret, and just a large button with a label. Just try to reload. Yeah, something like over here.
Okay, and Aaron, do you have a preference?
Not a strong feeling. What I would say is, like, thing with all of these, the more interactive these things get, the more considerations we have to take, the more potential accessibility pitfalls there are. So I worry that if we keep like if this gets too advanced, like it's never gonna be done. Because it's gonna get stuck on like implementing some really fancy like way of like turning on and off components or turning on and off filters. And so part of me feels like, part of me is just leaning towards like something simple, like you said, Benji, like keeping it simple with like radio buttons. Because I think also like we've got we might be too far along the development project browser to do something like really significant change like what you just showed there, Ralph, because we've already got these like filters you can turn, like when you turn on a filter, it appears along the bottom and then you can remove it. Which again, I don't know like how radio buttons, it's weird how you have like, I don't know, that when you change the I guess with the radio buttons, when you change the state, I guess it updates those yeah, those like filters. Just I suppose that's fine. I'm just mindful that I don't want us to like inadvertently like cause this to keep, result in delays to project browser, which it probably, I don't think it will, but it's just that I'm just mindful that like, these things can take time, and I think we should be careful about that as well.
So Ralph, I also noticed there's the list in the grid options that we've talked about before. Is that the sort of thing you would like to have underneath maintenance status?
Oops, one sec. You mean?
Just imagine the list and grid buttons lifted up and put underneath maintenance status, and then instead of list and grid, one would be all and one would be maintained. Is that the sort of toggle or whatever that you have in mind?
No.
Okay, you want a single
button with two different states.
Okay, got it. And Scott, what's your preference?
Radios is the default answer.
Okay, so the same thing that I suggest.
Yeah. I would say open the follow-up in the future for the UX enhancement to make them fancier and use JavaScript or more complex UX. But yeah, keep the scope, keep focus on the scope.
Yes, I agree.
Because I'd like to see this. Yeah, I'd like to see this get in sooner too, even if that's just like a step back there. It's a huge enhancement on it overall. Don't lose sight of the wider goal, right? Can't make everything perfect. We can definitely make things better.
And don't lose sight of scope. This issue was about making the categories take up less room. And I think looking at the screen we see right now, someone gave into the temptation, oh, if we're going to put the categories in one place, let's make it nice and consistent and have select lists for all of them because that looks so nice and consistent. But that's a mistake because it's not consistent underneath. You're making it look more consistent than it is.
It should be the design of the column. Sorry, it should be the design of the columns that makes that consistency, not the content of the columns.
Okay. So Ralph, can you agree that for this issue to control scope, we should keep the radio buttons that we currently have, move the categories into the select list, and as a follow-up issue, redesign those radio buttons to some toggle or possibly some other interface?
It would be okay, but I have worries. Let's put it that way. But yeah, technically it would be okay-ish. But yeah, the only problem I see is with yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. That's what I want to hear. What's your concern with having radio buttons?
No, with radio buttons, that problem is also surfaced. That is that you also already have here with that select list. That is also worrying for me. That show all option, which you don't have over for the filter by category section. Here it's implied, here it's explicit, but the behavior is the same.
And that difference is closely related to why I think we should have different widgets for the two.
Why? Because technically you would also need a show all for the filter then.
Facets has that as an option, right? Facets allow you to have a set a select all option on top. So that's what you're talking about, that similarity. Right, so this drop down had the ability just to have the additional JavaScript to say select all or deselect all, likewise, right? Remove all filters. Can't apply all without being able to remove all.
No, but I mean the fact that if no category is selected here, everything is shown. That detail is missing for that component. That is the problem I see.
I don't see that as affecting the decision between radios and toggle and select list for the other three. And I agree with Scott that there should be additional options to select all and clear all. And I also agree, and we've talked about it in the past, that Drupal has this pattern that selecting nothing is the same as selecting all, which is kind of illogical. But unfortunately, it's an established pattern.
And one other detail from that issue in comment number 27, Chris suggests, I think we should get rid of chips for non-categories and only show chips for categories. The state of the select shows you what you've chosen there, and I think that's adequate for categories. I love it. I would love it if it would show selected if it wasn't all of them, so it should show 3 selected if you pick them up.
So he's kind of saying the same thing, like if the other 3 categories were radios, they wouldn't need a pill. If the filter category had its own clear all filters, we wouldn't need pills. People could just select what they wanted to apply, and then they'd have a global button on the actual filter dropdown that let them reset or clear. Recommended filters doesn't mean anything because it's just the default state.
Yeah, that's the default state. No, but he is saying at the moment, oops, you have active, maintained, and covered shown. Those 3 shouldn't be shown or should simply just dropped, and only the chips for or the pills for the filter by category selected should be shown. And instead of select categories, if at the moment it's 11 or 20 categories are selected, then it should show 20 categories selected, or if it's less, 7 categories selected. That is the gist. But my worry is also, okay, it's an unusual case, but still those pills take up a lot of space, but they are also something for follow-up. It's quite dominant and again, sort of cluttering.
Well, I agree that there should not be a pill for development status. The only advantage having a pill is that it gives you a one-click alternative. And if you had radio buttons instead of a select list, then you would already have that. And I think it's confusing to have all of these pills, for most of which are for categories and a few of which are for the others.
Yeah, if we look at what views does, which is also coincidentally a part of Drupal, when you have exposed filters, you select your filters, you apply the filters, and it doesn't add these pills. The only difference is you would get like a reset button. And in theory, It's relying on the user to know that they've selected these filters. Because the thing is like, see, that's the thing, like as a user, we don't need, like you've already, when you go to filter, you're making a decision to apply some filters. So you know what filters you've applied. You know you've interacted with it. I was gonna say you could go to like the content view or something, because that has, if you want to show it. Just like
Admin
go to
content.
admin content.
1 second. I have a patch that prevents me to click the edit button.
I was just saying like the admin, going to admin content, which
Go to
would
the actual content page.
yeah,
Yeah,
not
not
that's
the edit
generated
view
by the
page,
user.
but look at the page admin content, which is generated by a view. Yeah.
Also unresponsive. Completely unresponsive.
Um,
1 sec.
maybe try my side.
Oh,
And we
yeah.
are running towards the end of the hour, so we have to wrap this up.
So like if you select, if you filter by say content type in the drop down, the user flow here is you go to the content list, you go to interact with the content type, you click on say article, you press, maybe filter by published, sure, language, you press filter, you get a reset button, and you see those filters are being applied. And as the user, you just applied those filters. So you have an indication there, okay, there's some filters applied because they're selected in those drop downs. And there's a reset button to go back to the default state.
But
And
that's a single select list. None of those are multi-select lists.
right.
Is...
But it's the point is like, my point I'm making is this is because it's just to demonstrate, like views doesn't add these like pills. It, as the user, you've just applied filters, so you know the filters are applied.
And it doesn't need to apply pills because these are all single select lists. None of these is a multi-select list.
So let's take the example of content type. If you were to change the filter for this and view, so now go to edit the view, but make this a multi-select field, views automatically transforms the widget to radio buttons. Or a multi-select list. Those are the two options for the widget that it lets you have.
Okay, and we're past the end of the hour. I have to leave. You can continue the conversation if you want. But, I'll be back next week. Thanks for coming.
Later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay on just a minute because I think if you guys have time, because basically my point is that like if you with views like doesn't apply those doesn't have those pills. So like my point is like, are they actually needed? Because yeah, as the user, you've went in and you've selected the filters. So like then you see the result. So the only reason I can like to have those pills would be to communicate to the user that there are maybe some like predefined filters, but
I like that suggestion where they're about putting in the count on the filter list instead of the pills, right? Like you have this many, and then having the filter list actually have a clear all on its own. Means that you're transferring all the way to the filter to the line of elements, right? To the line of inputs. Right now they're selects, all those selects. You don't need the pills. The 3 that are actually selects with 2 items right now, you don't need to count on them because the user knows that there's only 2 items in it. And the filter category with the helper below to let people know that there's a number of items selected, they would know that, see that visually quickly. at least. And then if that list had its own reset, that takes care of the clutter of pills.
Yeah.
And if the other 3 columns that have 2 items only become radio buttons or whatever, and however the UX flips on that, that's a smaller concern, right?
Yeah.
I think.
Just one thought. There is a pattern I've seen in several examples the Smashing Magazine provided. Some pages use, aside the results, some use just the result, some use the keywords that were searched for the results underneath. Maybe, as a thought, not sure how it would work or if it would be too overwhelming. But if you go with that pattern and use maybe number of results and maybe the filters applied there and move everything out of that field set up there underneath and less prominent and taking up that much space.
It's worth a mock-up, right? At
Pardon?
least. It's worth
Yeah.
something to mock up.
Yeah.
Put together a mock-up at least. Thinking about it.
But selecting all the available categories is still an edge case and won't happen. So usually it will be 3 to 5 tops, I suppose, categories, which is way more doable space-wise. So yeah, maybe. But if it does. But with a single, if we go down to the example of just
Ralph, are you still meant to be sharing your screen?
oh.
All right. I actually have to go. I do have to go. I
Okay.
got some work to do too.
Okay.
Have a good day, guys.
Likewise.
So, what were you saying, Ralph?
Yeah, my point was just having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pills is probably the maximum number, more or less,
Yeah.
one will have. So
And if like active maintained, Kara's Village, if those aren't pills, then become shorter. What if you actually search in the keyword search field? Is that added?
what is added?
If the term is added as a pill to the list.
Oh, no, that is not.
Oh, see, that's weird to me. Because, well, I guess it is and it isn't, because, if the point of this is to because then presumably the clear all doesn't clear the keyword search. Or does it? No, that leaves the keyword search in. But
that refers only to the filter settings that clear all.
yeah, I would kind of personally I would have expected it to also reset the search, because the keyword search forms part of the filtering experience. So it's weird to me that it's not part of the same thing.
That is a good point. But on the other hand, one detail, we had the problem of you can't distinguish between the pill for example, development status and the pill for filter by category. That they look homogeneous. But if you just drop those pills and don't display them and only display for categories, that at the same time is also odd and inconsistent.
That's why I think like with views, the views interface for like, you know, admin content or whatever else, like it doesn't have this concept of pills. And I think it's less confusing in some ways if it just doesn't, because I think that, like you said, if you search with views, that is like the keyword search essentially is part of the same set of filters.
Yep.
Because we have to think of this as like again, thinking about this in a user flow, if I'm a user going to this list, the action I'm performing here is to narrow down the search to things that I want to find. Whether that is by keyword or by category, like doesn't really matter. The thing I'm doing is narrowing down that list. That's a single interaction, I guess you could say. So it's weird that these are not part of the same experience, because I feel like it should, as with views, like exposed filters are all one, it's a single experience. It's a single point of like narrowing down what's presented on the screen. So
just one thought, that the separation, having first the search, then the filter, then the results, that was entirely based on the Smashing Magazine's recommendation on search UX. They said in all the user tests, studies, and workshops, it always boils down. Search is always one general term, but it is separated and structured in you first search, then you filter, and then you basically sort and watch the results. So those are sub steps.
interesting. I think this is the thing about then. Like, I think if the filters were then because now, okay, so we've moved them up to the top, so that's fine because they're less visually cluttered. But now I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, to me, it all looks like it's part of the same filtering experience. So now it feels weird that searching for something is like is different than filtering for something. Because I feel like if they were like the standard pattern for searching and filtering is that you have, you know, like if you look at any online store, the filters will be like down the side, broadly speaking. Like if you look at Amazon, you know, filters are on the left side, you know, or like there's clear visual separation between that searching and that filtering. Whereas now here we've like brought them together. So because we've done that, it now feels weird that clearing the filters doesn't also clear the search term.
That clearing the filter is basically an artifact or from the previous state.
Yeah.
That clear filter should probably be discussed how it behaves.
Yeah, and then you've got like recommended filters as well, which is fine. So yeah, this is the thing, is like I don't know, I feel like because we've moved them closer together, it now feels like they should all be part of the same experience.
Um,
They're still like separate right now.
One sec. There is basically what you're saying
Yeah,
probably goes
that
in that
really bad
direction.
example. Yeah.
That way you have all in one
Yeah. I mean,
single.
that was like that's basically what we're doing right now. So we're well, I guess what I'm saying is by moving the filters to the top, we've sort of visually communicated that they're much more closely tied to the search, but they still work. Well, I guess they were always at the top. I don't know. Yeah, because in this one, when you search for something, the thing I would expect is like when you search for something and then in the drop downs, like the clicking search takes into account like your search term and the filters you've selected. And so like if you clear those filters, I'm assuming it clears out everything.
In here, the reset I would expect, I can't
Oh,
test
because
it,
that's inside there. Yeah. See,
that it
that's
would
there. So that only resets what's inside it then.
inside the modal or the
Yeah.
dialog. Yeah.
But we've got a reset button that's outside, and the reset button outside only resets the filters. It doesn't reset keyword search.
Yeah.
And that's okay if they weren't so close together. But because they're so close together, I mean, maybe because there is like a box around them, but like,
And technically speaking, that field is search, and that all those fields are filters, and clear
Yeah.
filters refers to filters. So
yeah,
I see your point, and that one the too many things open, close, 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 close. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, it's complicated
yeah.
somehow. But looking at that search Eurolex example, that's also one of the reasons why I'm hesitant in regards of going with radio buttons here. It's less compact
Yeah.
and
Oh,
I'm not sure. But yeah, there's the time aspect, and therefore
and then this,
maybe
if the filters were radio buttons, it would make more sense to have them down the side, I guess. Or and maybe it wouldn't, but like they would feel more. I think this is the problem because by having them at the top and not down the side, it makes them feel a lot more like entangled with the search, keyword search. And on small, like I guess, yeah, I don't know.
me neither.
Hmm.
The only thing I know, yeah, check radio buttons might be clearer, but still they have their downsides as well. First, from that aspect that horizontally aligned with that multi-select field, as well as the point I've mentioned with that show all, which is explicit for those three, and then implicit in here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's weird. I don't like I don't like the idea of like mixing different. I mean, it might be fine, but I think what you're saying is like it doesn't. It probably wouldn't look good if we like mix different uh elements
Yeah.
because it's gonna look. It's gonna look weird.
And that is the reason why I've suggested those toggle buttons. That way they are sort of
Yeah,
visually consistent, even though they are two different
yeah.
concepts. But it would be at least a compromise.
It could be done.
Yep, I agree, but it just
I think it'd probably take up less space.
yep. And it might even work that way to go with a single line
Mm.
approach like here. Yeah, but still, that solution for mobile might look odd.
How does that, do you know how that works on a small screen?
Technically, that component is one single element. That search field, including those 3 multi-select fields. And no idea how they wrap or align things on mobile. And unfortunately, those is from a workshop they did with the EU, and there's no working prototype yet
Okay.
to take a look at. So
Okay. So the other thing to consider is like go back to the example of views, right? So like people using this are probably going to be used to like using experiences also generated by views. So like the admin content list and other things. Part of me feels like the behavior should be similar to views because that's what people expect the Drupal admin interface to work like.
yeah,
In Project Browser, the fact it's not generated by views is both a good thing and a bad thing in that regard. But it'd be nice if actually it was generated by views because then it could enable so many more interesting things. However, that aside, when I suggested that idea, I don't think anyone listened to me, but way back at the start. But yeah, I think there's value in considering making the experience as similar as possible to how you filter content and search for content. Because it might not be perfect and it might not be great. I'm not saying it's perfect or great, but at least it's consistent with everything else in the admin interface then.
yeah. And that was my idea behind these suggestions, to get it sort of similar, but definitely those select with only 2 options is not an option at all,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But
Okay, well,
tricky.
I also have to now go, but I think it sounds like there's at least some things that could be considered, and radio buttons is one of those things. Making it work more like views is another thing, and that could include radio buttons. But what it would mean is that it would mean that we would drop pills and the search would become part of the filters, and there would be a reset button and a search button or a filter button, whatever you want to call it. And again, I'm not saying it's a good idea or a bad idea, just saying it's in the interest of providing a consistent experience. It's something to consider. And
Tricky.
That's-
And talking
yeah.
of consistency, if you take a look at that, at the moment nothing is found. Oh, odd.
I think you broke it.
Yeah. It's in flux. So, but yeah, that is another problem with all the things there, which categories to use, and all the other filter options. They are not applicable to recipes.
I mean, yeah, even the pagination is not consistent.
It is not.
Like, so with like other parts of Drupal, like I don't think it is. Like the result, like modules per page, for instance, is down there as an option. And I don't know, it's
Oh, no, oh, you know, it's interesting. Take that. That's tricky. If you select a category over at Drupal.org, the source, and go over to recipes. Oh no, it's working. Strange.
yeah, that might be weird. That's weird. I don't understand the recipes tab. Like why is it different from Drupal.org? Like hmm.
Yeah, now I got it reproduced again. Yeah. That is also, those tabs shouldn't be there.
Yeah, the tabs confuse me a little bit.
Yeah, in particular, it's settings you do underneath the search field. Those tabs would have to be down there underneath the filters.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense
Mm.
because the scope, I would expect the search in here refers only to that source, and the settings and the search and filters in here refers only to that source. But it's basically overarching.
Yeah,
But based on that interface, that's not clear at all.
yeah. Hmm. Okay, well,
Anyway,
I don't know if we have a resolution on this, but
not at all.
well, it was good chatting with you. Okay, I'll be hopefully back next week. Hopefully, I've been kind of like really busy lately, and it's not really had much energy for
Uh-oh.
this, but
Is the upgrade to Drupal 10 for university still underway?
yes, it's nearly it's nearly done, I think. But
Uh-oh.
luckily, no, because yeah, it's still very much in progress because my area, like the part of the website that I'm working on right now doesn't have it, but we'll get it very soon. So, we're still in a big migration from our Drupal 7 CMS to our Drupal 9, now 10 platform. So that's not going to be done anytime soon. That's massive work in progress.
So it will be Drupal 11 then, probably.
We might still be on 10 by the time it's done. I think that the migration is taking up a lot of resource, so it's hard to get other things done. That's like
Okay.
yeah. I mean that's a slightly different team than me because my main project is our whole degree finding searching experience. Well, funny enough. And all the content types around that. So that's what I'm leading on. So
Okay.
with well, yeah, it's all fun. So yeah, okay, well, I
Fingers
will
crossed.
hopefully be back next week. Yeah.
Okay, then rest well and have a nice weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye bye.